Welcome again, everyone. Thanks for joining this talk. Today we'll speak about why you need to consider accessibility throughout the project lifecycle, and we'll do that using a case study from one of our clients. But first of all, I want you to imagine having to blindfold yourself, grabbing your phone, and trying to fill a very important application form that will allow you to get funding for your sports club and ensure it survives during the pandemic, for example. How is that gonna go for you? I can imagine you'll be giving up before you can even enter your name on the phone, right? It's really important that we always think about how blind users can enjoy the same convenience as we have on the internet. Everything is a few taps away for us. Often we forget about people with accessibility needs. And when we build a website, it's the norm nowadays to make everything responsive for large desktop and narrow phone device. It comes as standard. But it's still very far from being the norm when it comes to accessibility. And it's even a legal requirement now in Section 508 in the US or similar regulations in Europe. Not just, even if you avoid any fines, you need to think about the reputation of potentially losing government contract and credibility through some bad PR. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll share with you the exact steps and all our secrets on how we delivered an accessible website for one of our clients, Sport England. Sport England's mission is to keep the UK population active, and a big part of their remit is to support disabled users and funding clubs that promotes physical activity. If you follow all the steps that I'll show you, you'll have a site that is not only accessible and compliant, but it will also help your search engine optimization, the performance, and the overall user experience for everyone. The results for Sport England have been amazing, and we'll see in a few minutes how we did it. A quick background and introduction. I'm Sylvain Reiter, the co-founder at Cyberduck. We're a digital agency based in London, in the UK, and we're delivering digital transformation through user-centered design, UX, and technology. Of course, we do all of that mostly using Drupal. So how do you get started on your next project? Well, it's not just an item in your launch checklist, and we often say in the community that whatever you need to be done, there's usually a ready-made Drupal module for that. Yeah, in the open source community, someone's done it, but that's not the case here. There's no shortcuts. It's not a last-minute fixes that you can do during final UAT stages, and it really needs to go throughout the project lifecycle. So let's explore each one now. And we'll start from the user experience phase. So that's very early in the project when you start identifying the audience. You have to make sure to include users with specific access needs in all research stages. Think about not only the needs, but also the goals, and ensure they have specific access, that all of that is factored into the persona and the user research you do. Thinking about how dyslexic users or visually impaired users could be interacting with your product and services. Because from there you can plan a clear navigation at the information architecture stage in terms of how you're going to group the content together, how you're going to section different headings, just to make sure that your users can easily find the content that they're looking for. And then you need to think about the content, make the content accessible in multiple formats. Like this example on the website that we built. Obviously the default is HTML, but anytime there is video content, we enable captions or a provided version in large print. And the PDF is a big debate at the moment, where they can be made very compliant, but are usually less accessible when they have complex layouts. So you need to think about all of that, and not just configuring your CMS for HTML, but for other format as well, and make that accessible. And then when you start populating the pages in the CMS, you need to make sure you define a clear structure with headings that make sense. I'm not sure if you've ever seen how blind users using a site, but this is how they navigate.
Know where I need to go to
Home 262.
I have home
When you're here, 3 of 60.
or
No
here.
comments, 4. I'll even 5. Campaigns at work, 6 of 60. News and box, 7 of careers, 8 of 62. Press back, 9 of 60. Contact us, 10 of 6. Home, 11 of 62. When you're here, 12 of print this page.
See
13 of
all
62.
these different links here.
You see how the assistive technology is reading out loud the different headings of the page. So that's why they need to be very descriptive, so the user know which one to click on and where to stop to go to the right section of what they're interested in. The final stage of that is also thinking about interactive forms, which is usually the main kind of call to action or the main goals when you're building an interactive website. You need to make sure that you have the right labels, there's clear error validation messages, and again, everything needs to follow the standard to make them accessible. We can then move on to the visual design stage. So one of the most common accessibility needs is around color and vision, color blindness and visual impairment, either due to age or other diseases. What we find most often is a challenge with corporate brand guidelines when clients come to us with specific logos and color requirements, but those guidelines are often outdated, where they were not made for the web and they're completely not accessible. So we need to have that flexibility and make it clear to the client early on that we're going to have to adjust them. So in terms of the color contrasts, there's a minimum of 4.5 to 1. In terms of the ratio, you need to think about the font sizes, the background colors. There's a few tools that you can use, like this plugin, it's called Stark, that's accessible to in Sketch and Figma. So again, share that with your design team, should be aware of that. And again, make sure you have the design right before you start coding. We can then move on to the coding stage. So obviously the code that you write is what's going to be rendered and read by the assistive technologies, such as screen reader. So you need to pay a lot of attention to the different tags from the different headings, having alt tag on all the images, the right captions, the right area label. The specification and the guidance from WCAG are very specific, and that's where you need to spend the kind of, in terms of slicing a design, takes a little bit of extra time if you want to make it very compliant. So you need to plan that early on in your budget and your timeline as well. Another point to highlight is the order of the elements to enable keyboard navigation. You can see on the Sport England website there is a secondary navigation on the top right. And even though it appears above the main navigation, it should be secondary when in terms of the tab order when users are navigating. You want them to go through the main navigation. You see this go back to top button at the footer of the page. When that's being clicked, you need to reset the tab order to start again from the logo in the main navigation and how it interacts with the search and all of that. There's a lot of little details that are completely hidden, like clients don't really see the difference in general. But it does require extra time, extra budget to make a big positive impact to accessibility for your end users. So as you've seen again, in terms of design, coding, there's no shortcut and there's no Drupal module for this. You have to do the hard work. And now once you've built your website, it's time to test what you have done. But it's really hard to test your own work, and a lot of the automated tools never really cover the whole accessibility requirements. They're mostly not suitable. It's on this website, it's very easy to get 100% on the Google Lighthouse score, but it's not very accurate. What we had to do is get real users, so we're bringing external partners that are performing tests with disabled users using real assistive technology devices, like it would be in the real world, and those automated tools cannot cover that. So if you don't have the budget, there are some other plugins and tools that you can simulate assistive technologies, like JAWS and NVIDIA, but you can try to do that. If not, you can also bring accessibility partner, an agency like us. We're a member of the International Association for Accessibility Professionals, and we can kind of do some additional audit and give you some reports about the different level of compliance. And last tip, or more of a reminder, I guess, is that it's never over. You will never be completely done with accessibility. There's always going to need to be some improvement. The regulations are evolving or are subject to interpretation. And if you add a change, or like a small change to your JavaScript or make another deployment, could start breaking the entire navigation. Again, you don't need a full external retest on every deployment, but try to use some of those automated tools to validate the key items on every release. And hopefully there's some things that you can automate as well in your continuous delivery pipeline. So I hope you find this useful. You can stay in touch. Feel free to connect with me to continue the discussion on Twitter, LinkedIn. We're also recruiting at Cyberduck and Drupal developers, technical leads, and UX designers as well. So feel free to get in touch. And to conclude, I just want you to remember, who are we building websites for? It's very important that, always think about the end users and the customers, all our customers. So I want you to try and be the hero of your next project and make sure you don't leave anyone out, because everyone deserves a great experience when they come on your website.